Hi, my name is Mark Brunton. I'm the Operations Section Chief for CAL FIRE Incident Management Team 3, and it's the August 29th summary of our incident on the CZU Lightning Complex. We're live tonight with some questions. I'll start off with a very quick overview of the incident, and then we'll move on to the questions that you've sent in via social media. So overall, really good day on the fire. North end of the fire, very active today. We did some burnout operations near the Battalion Park, and that's just simply to reduce the time that we're waiting for the fire to work its way down to our control lines. Something we do on a regular basis on these kind of incidents, and it's a very controlled event, and so we had a lot of success doing that today. Had a lot of support from our aircraft later in the afternoon when we could fly our aircraft. So again, that's an ongoing operation and looking really good this afternoon. Along the coast, we're continuing our mop-up of that area. A lot of work left to be done. We were able to repopulate the community of Davenport today. So a lot of moving parts there, a lot of people getting back into their homes. And we did a really good burnout operation yesterday, neighboring San Vicente Canyon, that had a lot of success, which enabled us to be able to repopulate that area. Our southern part of the fire is holding very well in the area around Felton, and that also allowed us to repopulate the community of Felton. So that's really good to get those folks back home. We're very excited about that. Highway 9 corridor, continuing our hard work up that way. It's going to be a long, arduous process because of the steep terrain, the heavy fuels. We did have some fire that did cross our lines, just skunking away in the duff, but it's something we've been dealing with for a number of days, and we are going to deal with, unfortunately, for the coming days with the hotter and drier weather. We're vigilant. We've got people patrolling that, and as soon as we discover that, we're on top of it and taking care of that issue. So it'll be something ongoing that unfortunately we're going to have to deal with. The area Bonnie Doon, continued work in that area, a lot of work to be done, and as we get resources, and we are steadily getting more resources, we're putting them into action to take care of that issue and that Highway 9 corridor. Weather didn't really cooperate with our aircraft today, but we did have a good window for a few hours to fly this afternoon. We flew our aircraft the most we possibly could in the short time, and able to drop quite a bit of water based on that time frame to support not only the burn operation, but our hot spots throughout the fire. Able to get a lot of good clearance in our roads interior to the fire to move our resources in to do more mop-up, more damage inspection, and that's ongoing. And then the Highway 236 corridor all the way through the park has been cleared, so we're able to finally get through into the park and then start working further into the park as far as dropping the trees that are damaged by fire so that they aren't a life or safety hazard. So that's pretty much the overview today. Had another really good day, and with the coming weather and the resources we're getting, we're going to have more good days ahead.
All right, well, now for some questions. Andy on Twitter says, Chief Brunton consistently talks of importance of the division Golf Kilo lines to deter the fire from spreading into Santa Clara County, Palo Alto, Los Altos, etc. In the early dynamic days of the fire, how close was this to happening, and what can be done long-term to reduce the risk?
So yeah, the up here is over the Division Kilo area. That was something identified very early on. As we were watching the fire burn, we saw the shifting wind patterns. Initially, it wasn't as big of a deal because the wind patterns were predominantly from the north, and it was a big push to the south. So this is more of what we call flanking maneuver, not as a very rapid progression of the fire. So we did identify that early as being a weak potential part of the fire, especially as the wind was going to shift. And that's why we really look closely at the weather. And we always try to make our plans not reactionary, but we try to plan 48, 72, and 96 hours ahead. So we take all those factors, and even though we're dealing with the fire right away, we are always looking ahead. And that's what's important about having an incident management team, is that our folks are trained, and what makes us called a Type 1 team is you're looking 48, 72, 96 hours ahead in all your planning processes. It makes it challenging, makes it difficult, but that's why what we do is so effective. So we identified that as being important. We were able to get out, take some of the local knowledge as to what is available for a control line. We found an old haul road, logging road that was very conducive to our needs. We were able to get equipment in there, open that up, widen it out, and then staff it appropriately with resources. So then when the fire did shift or start moving more that direction, we were able to be on top of it and take care of that. So yeah, that was going to be a direct threat, because when you looked at the topography and the fuels, some of these drainages would channel fire up into it. A good adage that we always teach our new people in is where water flows, fire goes. So if you can imagine an area that water during the winter when it rains would drain water off the mountains, well, in the summer when you have the fire, it'll funnel that right up. So we always look at that topographical feature in our planning process and looking that we had some drainage that would go right up that ridge and then over into lighter flashy fuel, which means it's more receptive to the embers and the spot fires. That was a potential that we were looking at very closely and decided we needed to take some action there, and we did. So what can you do in the future? Well, one thing is with your homes, we always preach defensible space. Having that 100-foot clearance, doing your due diligence and making sure you have that clearing of the vegetation is critical. And that gives us a huge advantage if you have fire in what we call the wildland urban interface, which is a fire in amongst homes. So that helps us. So if we did have that event where fire did burn into those communities, that is in areas that do have a significant fuel loading, but not as bad as what we're seeing here. A lot of light flashy fuels, very receptive to spot fires. But if you have your defensible space, it gives us a huge advantage in being able to control the fire, especially in those lighter flashy fuels. So I can't appreciate enough about having that defensible space and make sure you have that. And then also taking advantage of when you have fire safe councils in your communities and looking at fuels reduction projects and advocating for fuels reduction projects in your community. It doesn't mean you have to wipe out all the trees and all that sort of thing. You can do a very good job of what we call shaded fuel breaks, and where you eliminate the surface fuels, trim up the trees, a very park-like setting. We see it up and down the state. The area that I typically work in the Sierra foothills, we are very aggressive about it because we have that mix of the wildland urban interface, and we use those fuels projects extensively for the protection of those communities.
Joel on Facebook asks, due to the amount of material on the forest floor in the Santa Cruz Mountains that has built up over the years, can or would the fire team allow this material to burn to reduce the fuel load and help prevent future fires? As the chief has mentioned, this hasn't been burned in maybe 100 years along the Highway 9 corridor, so the fuel load is extremely thick. That
is correct. It was extremely thick. Like I've said time and again, we look at our historical fires and to recorded history, and we haven't seen a fire of significance in this area for well over 100 years. Who knows when really it was last? Maybe 150, could be longer. It's hard to say at this point. So yes, it is important to, when you have the opportunities to reduce those fuel loadings through, again, fuels projects and so forth, prescribed fire burns and that sort of thing. In this case, because of the nature of the limited resources we had due to the alternative strategies we had to employ because of the difficulties with the terrain and so forth, we actually did have to let some of this burn. It burned at a very low intensity, what we call an understory burn. So that is something that eliminates that duff and those lower surface fuels, the brush and so forth, that is not typically sometimes even native to a redwood forest. And by kind of a silver lining of the cloud, so to speak, is that we did do a lot of that. So a lot of that fuels reduction was done by this fire, by us allowing it to burn out in that fashion. And some of it, like I've said many times, to allow it to burn out to areas that we could best control it. So if there was a silver lining, one of the things is we by chance did a very large scale burn of those fuels. So that will help in the future reduce any potential fires.
Quiz on Twitter asks, with so many weakened fire-damaged trees, should residents be concerned about a potentially stronger mudslide season this winter?
Yes, that's something that all of us have spoken of regarding what's going to happen this winter. If we do have, and the coastal ranges, it is our watershed. That is where eventually we get our drinking water from. It starts in these mountainous areas and through the vegetation, heavy rainfall, and that goes down into our reservoirs and so forth. So that's part of the ecology of this area. But yeah, as part of it is once that vegetation is gone and denuded, then there's nothing holding the dirt and so forth on the hillside. And our team is very sensitive to it because when the Thomas Fire happened in Southern California, that very following winter, and I personally was on that fire, as well as many of my teammates, a few months later we had the torrential rain in Santa Barbara. And our team 3, was activated on that incident for the mudslides to manage and mitigate that incident. So it's near and dear to our hearts. We lived that tragedy with that community, and dealt with that and saw firsthand, and I've never seen anything that cataclysmic at all regarding where fire had taken away everything that was holding that hillside together, and just basically with that heavy rain in a short period of time washed all that down. Am I saying that's going to happen here? Absolutely not. Is there a potential? Absolutely, there could be. And that is something that we are going to be employing a specialized team, a work team that will come in. It's a watershed emergency response team that will come in, and they're going to develop a plan and institute mitigations to help reduce that potential for happening this winter. So we're not just going to say, well, hope for the best. It's the fact that we actually, once as part of the recovery process, from lessons learned, utilize these specialized teams to come in and take care of that issue. But it is something to be mindful of as we go into the winter.
Jamie on Twitter says, it would be great to have some more detail on the efforts around Felton, south of the Felton Empire Grade Road.
Yeah, so a lot of the efforts, we've conducted a lot of efforts not only in the suppression of the fire and putting in our control lines and so forth around Felton. As we saw today, we were able to repopulate that because of the mitigations that we took and the lines we put in and the firing, the burnout operation, so that we can render it safe. After the fire is done, throughout the entire fire, we are going to do fire line suppression repair, where we go in and all the dozer line and hand line that was put in, we're going to take special mitigations so that it is a less impact on the land and will reduce the amount of erosion potential in the future with the moisture that we always get here on these coastal valleys, as well as that watershed emergency response team. They're going to do specialized mitigation. So as far as the community from start to finish, we've done everything from mitigating and stopping the fire from entering the community. We're going to do things to repair whatever damage we've done with our suppression activities, and then we're going to go a step further in reducing any potential for any sort of watershed emergency based on heavy rains.
Annika on Twitter says, Chief Brunton is doing a great job with these. Can he explain what mop-up means in the context of this fire? Also, how do they determine the percent contained?
Okay, so, well, thank you. I'm hopefully giving you the best information possible. I know that a lot of people are very anxious because they've been removed from their homes or they don't understand a lot of the jargon we use, and we have a lot of jargon, so I can understand not understanding it. So mop-up. What mop-up is once a fire has been extinguished, there are still hot spots throughout the fire for a variety of reasons, the heavy fuels and that sort of thing. And what mop-up is a very methodical process for firefighters, somewhat mundane process, but very important to extinguish all fire, all heat, smokes the best we can, and bring that to a safe and render it safe for communities to reestablish themselves, people to move back in, and to prevent any sort of fire to reignite or start. Because of the fuels, because it's a very large area, people are just going to have to be aware that they will see smokes. And it's unnerving when it's been in your backyard and you've gone through this horrific event. But be mindful that it's going to be something you'll see. And the local unit that will be left with this, they will be throughout the rest of the summer until we get the heavy rains, be responding to these calls for service to put out these little smokes. Be mindful that although you see the smoke and it may be a bit terrifying, the fact is you have a lot of burnt material that is typically surrounding it, and they're deep within what we call the berm. The chance of them igniting and starting another fire is extremely low. So although it may be terrifying, it may be unnerving to most folks, in reality, it's a non-factor other than we will come out, we will extinguish that to make sure and render it safe.
Okay. Final question. Steve on Nextdoor wants to know, when will the Cleveland Browns win a Super Bowl?
I'm with you. That's a great question. I wish I had an answer to it. I feel sorry for those fans, and I feel sorry for that team, but there's always going to be that team that's in the dumps, and I'm hoping someday they do, because just like some of the other great teams that haven't seen a championship, hey, even the Cubbies won one once. So I think their time's due, and when it happens, I think it's going to be huge for that city. Good luck to them.
They need to win like champions.
That's right. Need to win like champions.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm sure people appreciate it. That was very informative. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.